Welcome, everyone, to the new revamped edition of the Sports Lodge. I'm here joined by my new co-host, my good buddy, Mike Jones. Mike, how you doing today?
Not bad, brother. How's it going with you?
It's a little cold outside, a little blustery, windy, snowy, like Canada. For the first time this winter, we're really kind of feeling it. And I really don't like it. I don't know about you, but I love winter sports. I hate winter weather.
Well, it's a great time to be sitting inside and talk about sports then, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. It's nice and warm here inside the sports lodge. And I'm sure you're nice and warm there in your office. The list of things we got to talk about today, it's extensive. We're going to cover the Leafs and their 5-2 record, a 6-2 record, sorry. And we're going to get into the Raptors. We're going to get into the Blue Jays, a little bit of UFC 257, what's going on in the lightweight division. And then we're going to touch on, of course, Super Bowl 55, Tampa Bay versus Kansas City, the GOAT versus the Phenom. We'll get into all of that. But of course, we are a Toronto podcast, a Toronto-centric podcast, and we need to start with what's important. Breaking news today from head coach Sheldon Keefe. It seems that we have lost the backup goaltender, Jack Campbell, for what he said is weeks for a lower body leg injury. And before we get into it, I need to tell all the haters, get off Matt Tkachuk's dick, because this was not his fault. Campbell cramped, should have come out of the game, did not come out of the game. And when you cramp, you have a tendency to pull something. And that's exactly what happened in this situation.
Honestly, I agree. Matt Tkachuk, that's just the way he plays. That's who he is, right? You have to expect that coming into a game against him, right? He could have avoided going on the back of the head there, but that's not what he's injured for, right?
Yeah.
Like he's gotta, everybody's just gotta settle down about him. That's how him and Brady both play. They're both agitators, but they can put the puck in the net and they'll be right in the goalie's face all the time. They're very offensive players also. So I
Yeah,
completely agree with you on that.
it is just the way they play, and it's almost like a recency bias for hockey fans, people who don't remember just 5 years ago how much more aggressive the game was, and then you go back 10 years and 15 years, and you go back pre the 03 lockout, and I could remember watching an old game on Leafs TV where I saw Matt Sundin literally coasting on the back of a Chicago Blackhawks jersey, holding him back and just dragging onto him. So the game has evolved and has changed. But what these guys are doing, what the Tkachuks are doing, what Matt Tkachuk specifically has been doing, while it may seem to be dirty nowadays, it was just commonplace just about 10 years ago, right? So just need to get over it. These guys learn to play tough, gritty hockey. You got to just look who their dad is and realize that that's in their blood. And I think NHL needs a little bit more of that. A little bit less skill and a little bit more grit. And I'm not calling for Fraser McLaren and Colton Orr to get back on the Leafs. I'm just saying just a little bit more grit. Look at what Wayne Simmons has done throughout his whole career. If you want to talk about a Maple Leaf, that style of player is more needed nowadays, not just to protect your team, but to give you a little bit of sandpaper and some scoring.
Yes, no, exactly. That's why I love the addition of Wayne Simmons. He's been awesome. Like just in that aspect alone, he's just been awesome for us. Like we haven't had that. And you not notice that people aren't bullying the players as much as now?
Yeah, and I've also noticed that they're standing up for themselves more. Matthews breaking a stick over somebody, Marner not taking it and throwing some punches, John Tavares getting a little bit more aggressive. The team has a different mentality to it. It's not just one guy who's kind of tough and Jake Muzzin and a big guy in Freddie the Goat who just doesn't know how to use his size. It's a bunch of guys with a different mentality who came into this team and they've changed it significantly. They're not a gritty fighting team, but they're a team that has some sandpaper that can score. Now, not to bury the lead, we got to get back to this Jack Campbell news. He is out weeks, and it looks like we're going to see Michael Hutchison again as the backup for the Toronto Maple Leafs after he was let go last year and he went to Colorado. If I were to tell you then that Michael Hutchison would be backing up the Toronto Maple Leafs after the Jack Campbell trade in the 2020-2021 season, would you have believed me?
I am absolutely furious. No, I would have not. Honestly, I personally agree with everybody. I'm sure that you agree with me. Sorry, that Honestly, I'd rather have David Ayers in net than this guy. He has just been awful in Toronto. I don't give a crap if he has had a couple good games in the playoffs last year with Colorado. I don't care. He is cursed in this city. Send him down to the Marlies. He does great for them. He does great for the Marlies, but he cannot stop a beach ball for the Maple Leafs. It's terrible.
Yeah, and I mean, just look at that Colorado Avalanche team. Of course, he had a couple good games for that team. I mean, come on, great, good defense, great offense. All you got to do is stop one, or stop one out of every, or stop 5 out of every 6 pucks, right? And or 6 out of every 7 pucks, and you're good to go on that team because they can outscore. Now, you know, the Maple Leafs should have been able to outscore their offense, but they weren't able to get that done without having the confidence in their goaltender. And so yeah, of course he was able to have a couple good games in Colorado, but yeah, I'm with you on that one, man. Mike Hutchison, it really scares me. And you know what it says to me? We now have to run with Freddie or we're dead. And that, if you look at recent history, that has not been a good recipe for the Leafs. It's not been a good recipe for Fred. Fred's looked good this year. He's had for the first time as a Maple Leaf, he has had a competent backup. And if you don't even want to call him a backup, you want to call him a 1B. I understand the Jack Campbell talk. I understand how some people want him to be the starter, kind of understand it, but it's only because they haven't seen him as a starter. But if you want to look at him in the same light of Anton Khudobin in Dallas, or as I'm trying to remember his name, in Boston, they've got a great goaltending duo. This is horrible that I can't remember his name. I should remember his name. But Yaroslav Halak, that's what it is.
That's what I was thinking too. For some reason, Hasek was coming to my head, but I
It
was like,
just
that's not right.
just clicked as it was trying to stumble through my thoughts there. Yarrow Halak and Tuukka Rask in Boston in this new NHL. You look at the New York Rangers, you look at the Columbus Blue Jackets. They all have good goaltending duos and tandems, and that's the way the NHL needs to work, especially in a shortened 56 game season where you're playing 5 games in 7 nights. You're going to need a good backup, and unfortunately for the Leafs, they lost their decent backup, their good backup in Jack Campbell, and their decent replacement in Aaron Dell earlier in the season. Now we're down to the 4th goaltender on the rung in Michael Hutchison, a guy that should not even be putting the jersey on, let alone getting on the bench and charting shots and possibly getting in from an injury. Knock on wood, no injuries to Freddie tonight, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just frightening as a Toronto Maple Leafs fan to see Michael Hutchison back on the bench for Toronto as the backup goaltender, because he just does not have it. Maybe this new look Leafs will be better for him. Maybe the defense and the way they shut the plays down, the way they get down, they block the shots, and they communicate on the ice will be better for him. But I have to see it. You've got to prove it to me. I can't believe it on faith alone. But speaking of the defense, we have to get into Justin Holl and just how good of a defenseman this guy has become out of the system of the Toronto Marlies. He was 26 years old before he got
Wait,
up.
hey, he didn't start in the Marlies, man. This guy is from the very bottom of the barrel. The Leafs saw this kid, brought him in, and put him down in the ECHL. Had hope. They knew he had potential. And look what he did. Good every year in the ECHL. Amazing. One of the backbones of the Toronto Marlies championship team. And then now he's at the the Leafs now for his second full year now.
Yes, it'll be a second full season.
And he's just he's just running away with it. He's just going at it. He's on the top pairing now, if I'm not mistaken, as of last game. And he's very fast. He's a great skater.
He's on the shutdown pair with Jake Muzzin, so you'll see him a lot. You'll see him a lot against the other team's top line. The top pair is still Brody Riley, but that's more of as much as Brody is, by the way, has impressed me. He had a rough start, but he has impressed me ever since. Justin Holl to me is the big story because he cost you nothing. You brought him up from the minors and you developed him and you grew him. And this guy, he's 26 years old, 27 years old. That is old for hockey. Now, I'm used to seeing baseball players like Aaron Judge, he was a rookie at 26. I'm used to seeing that in that sport, but in hockey, if you're not coming into the league at 18, 19, 20 years old, you're often thought to be a journeyman or maybe even a bust. And Justin Hall has actually proven that now to be incorrect. He has changed the mentality of how Toronto looks at developing defensemen, and it's not develop them as quick as possible. Let's get them smart. Let's get them comfortable and then move them along. And he's done a great job. He's tied for the team lead in points in defensive scoring with Morgan Riley. Both have 4 points. And yeah, like I said, he's on that shutdown line, so he's against the other team's number one line. So it's good to see the Leafs be able to develop a defenseman. And it's interesting as we talk about defensemen that we're now going to talk about how the Toronto Maple Leafs have defensive depth enough to scratch Travis Dermott tonight.
That's honestly a blessing. It's awesome to say it. You know, Travis Dermott, he's an NHL player, and we have to scratch him. Like, I like the idea though, because like I think we need to get Lettinen playing more in order for him to actually get his feet in the NHL, which he hasn't really been able to do. And, you know, Travis Dermott, honestly, I wouldn't be too surprised if he gets moved eventually, because, you know, he has a lot of value. He's a skilled player, and he doesn't have bad senses on. So honestly, I could see him honestly being moved in the future too.
Yeah, I asked a buddy of mine who I talk Leafs with all the time. I looked at the time on the ice, and I believe it was 2 or 3 games ago for Dermott and Lettinen, and it was exactly the same, 8.5 minutes each. And my question to him was, how long until one of these guys takes over that entire minute total and gets those 17 minutes as a starter or as the third pairing guy for the Leafs? And I went on to say, what I mean is how long until Travis Dermott sits. And it seems like it's going to be tonight. It's going to be Lettinen, but something worries me a little bit, Mike, and maybe you can give me a little bit of insight on this. Where's Rasmus Sandin?
I have not a clue. I've been thinking the same myself. Like, he's on the taxi squad at least, right? Like,
Yeah.
but why he hasn't gotten in at all? Like, who else have we called up? We haven't just called up Lettinen, right?
No,
I'm
it's
pretty
just Lettinen right now on the
just
defensive
Lettinen. Well,
side.
like I can understand that though, because he's a pretty big signing. You know, you took him away from a lot of money in the KHL. You got to make it seem like it's worth it here, even if he's still having to like work his way into the roster. But yeah, like I don't understand it at all. Like I think you at least want to get him in a game here and there to keep him involved and keep him playing. He's on the taxi roster. He's not going to be down with the Marlies to play. He'll be just sitting there and practicing and not getting into any game action. Like get him in at least once. He hasn't played once this year.
Yeah, and he was the guy, he was the highly touted prospect who was taking Travis Dermott's job from him last year, right? So it's
Yeah.
really interesting and intriguing to see that we haven't even heard his name, not a sniff of Sandin at all. And it just makes me wonder and makes me worry if he's going along the lines of a Timmy Liljegren, what's going to happen there. And I mean, I liked what I saw with Sandin last year, but you need to see more. You need more development. So that's just a little bit of a worry for me with Rasmus Sandin as I slur and skip over my words there. Names are tough, Mike. By the way, in this job, names are tough. Thinking the last thought I have about the Toronto defensive core is I do want to talk about Brody. TJ Brody has been I don't want to say a godsend, but he has been exactly what Morgan Riley has needed. And it's very funny because it has been, let's get a left shot defenseman to go on the right year after year after year, and it never worked out with Riley. But here we go. We've got a left shot defenseman who's going to play on the right, and it works. Like I said, a little bit of rough start with the Leafs, but I'm seeing more and more good things as we go. A lot more communication too with this defensive core. Last year, you would see if it was, say, a 2-on-1 with one of the defenders rushing back, they would rush towards the puck, but then the other defender who was back would take the puck and you'd leave a guy wide open. Now I'm seeing pointing, talking, yelling, and maybe that's a a cause of having no fans, because you don't need to yell at the top of your lungs. You can actually get what your point across a lot easier, a lot clearer than you would in a normal situation. So I don't know if that's the case, but I do like what I see. I see TJ. I almost said Tyson Berry there, by the way. I see TJ laying out for blocks and taking the man, and yeah, with the overall grittiness of the team, it just seems that the defense has evolved into something that is of NHL caliber, whereas before it was very questionable.
Yeah, no, TJ Brody, he's brought in like bit more of a level of feistiness to the defense that I feel like it was just basically Jake Muzzin that was like that prior. Now, like and he brings a lot more just like overall, like our defense was more an offensive defense even when and when we always signed. That's why I don't understand Tyson Berry. Why did we get him? That's the opposite of the kind of defenseman we need at the time. But anyways, not to get off topic. Uh, I think he's been amazing. Like he's like just for again the things we needed. Like right now they weren't brought in to score a lot. These guys like Wayne Simmons and TJ Brody and Zach Bogosian, who is another one who's done better than I thought. Like he's coming in basically as a cheap, trying to stay in the league guy kind of contract.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah,
was going to bring
no,
up Bogo. Bogo has done a good job, and that's probably another reason why we haven't seen a guy like Sandin on the team, is because you have a guy like Bogosian who's holding down that third pairing spot, and that's a good thing because it's another guy who brings that sandpaper, right? And it may be him just trying to hang on in the league, but the Leafs need that kind of experience, right?
yep, no, exactly. But TJ Brody also is the exact same. He's been in the league for basically just as long, or no, not as long, but just about as Bogosian has. Like maybe just by a few years. So like he's been there in the league longer than Riley. So like he brings some veteran presence. And like that's the one thing is like we brought in I think we brought in the right veterans this year.
Yeah,
And that's helping out
that's
a
a
lot.
hard mixture to get though, right? And I'm for the Dubas haters out there about how he's built the team previous to this year, I think that you need to be allowed to learn on the job. How often have I applied for a job that I am not specifically qualified for, but as I get experience on the job, you get better, right? It's the same for
Yep.
Dubas. Yeah, he was the general manager of the Marlies and the general manager of Sioux, and before that a scout, right? But until you get in that general manager of an NHL team's chair, you don't know what it's like and how it's going to be. You don't know what dealing with other general managers is going to be like, especially being as young as he was. He had to fight for his respect. And so
Yeah.
he brought in his philosophy, and yeah, it was flawed. But to his credit, he's altered it. He's added some grittiness and some toughness. And so now he's kind of emerged his new school way of thinking with the old school mentality of what is needed to play this game the right way.
Yep. No, I completely agree on that too. It's not bad for a boy that started as a stick boy, right? He's
Hey,
done
man,
pretty well for himself in that case.
anybody who has dreams, who's doing the equipment and has dreams of running a team one day, Kyle Dubas, he's your mascot, man. He's the guy that you want to be chasing after. He is your hero at this point. um, as I get a message from one of our buddies telling me how Anderson's in trade talks. Campbell's just hurt. Anderson's not getting traded.
Yeah.
Okay, speaking of trades, you know what? The Leafs take on the Flames tonight at 9 o'clock. A little bit of a late start for us here on the East Coast. But what are you expecting tonight out of the boys on the second half of a back-to-back against the Calgary Flames? Getting that first 2 points in that muddy, mucky sort of style of game in game one is really key. They don't technically need these points. Now, you always want the points, but if you're going into a second half of a back-to-back, having lost the first one, the pressure's on, right? You've got to get the points. You can't lose two games, a la what happened with Edmonton and Toronto. You can't lose two games to one team in a row because now you drop 4 points to them. So a little bit of more of a relaxed style and maybe some more of an offensive game as opposed to the defensive muddy style game as it was in game one against Edmonton and game one against Calgary? Or are we going to see more of the same?
Well, I think it'd probably be, I wouldn't be surprised if they try and be a little bit more conservative and try and focus on making sure they have the proper lines with all these injuries right now and making sure everybody's in the right position and ready to go for more meaningful games in the next couple days after. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's more for just figuring out for the next short term future, just testing things out.
Final question. Do we see Matt Kachuk in a fight tonight? Are we now we expressed how the injury is not Matt Kachuk's fault, but these guys are going to be testy and they're going to want to set the tone. And having bad news to start the day of losing your backup goaltender, although they probably already knew that before the news was broken to us, it's going to put them in a little bit of a bad mood, I think. And I think that Matt Kachuk's going to have to answer the bell. I don't know. I'd like to know what you think.
Um, I think about like 75% chance on that. Like they're definitely gonna at least try and antagonize him to do it. Knowing him, he'll probably drop him. And you know what? Honestly, I'd love to see it happen no matter what, even if it's just for the fact of bringing up the morale for the team. You saw in the first game against Montreal when Wayne Simmons got in that fight, and as soon as right after we scored 2 goals, tied the
Yeah.
game, ended up tying the game and winning it. So like honestly, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up sending somebody out there to go after him as a tactic. Honestly,
There is a little bit of a danger with that though, Mike. There's a
yeah.
guy sitting on the bench that has a very large nose, a very large
Oh,
contract, and there is not a single man on the Toronto Maple Leafs roster who could hold a candle to what Milan Lucic could do to you. So if you go after Matt Kachuk, you could be having to answer the bell with Milan Lucic.
there's not many people in the entire league that can do that. All right. But yeah, very good point on that one. I wouldn't want to mess with that guy. That
Um,
yeah,
All right, so we talked about the possibility of Dermott being traded earlier on. There was a rather large trade that happened this weekend or this past weekend in the NHL. We had Columbus finally moving on from Pierre-Luc Dubois for surprisingly Patrick Laine from the Winnipeg Jets and Jack Roslovic, of course, a third-round pick, also going the way of Winnipeg
Columbus.
from Columbus. So Roslovic wasn't just a throw in. It was the third round pick, in my opinion, for Roslovic, and then straight up Laine for Dubois. The number 2 pick being traded for the number 3 pick in the very same draft. An interesting trade to say the least, because both guys now have to quarantine. We were wondering coming into the year, at least the sports world was wondering coming into the year, the hockey world, if you were going to see an American and a Canadian team trade because of the needed quarantine. And we have our answer here. Patrick Laine has expressed his interest to leave Winnipeg. I don't know why, to leave Winnipeg for a couple or for at least a year now. And with what was going on in Columbus with Dubois and Tortorella, that was wild. I just got to take a side for a second here. A guy like Dubois, who dominated the Leafs in the play-in round, played 2.5 minutes in a single game, and then was traded the very next day to another team. I watched those shifts, and they were dog shit shifts by Dubois. He didn't want to play. He didn't put any effort into it, and so I understand Torts benching him there. But man, there had to be a various list of things that went wrong in that. I don't care what Dubois said about how he wasn't invested in the long term. There had to be some things that went wrong in that locker room, that dressing room, from the end of last year to the beginning of this year to cause this big separation.
Do I need to start listing off the star players that leave as soon as they possibly can from Columbus? Like, do I actually have to start listing that? I don't know why people are that surprised. Torts is just a he's a a selective taste. You have to be able to handle that, or you're not. You have to be. Everybody knows who he is. Like it's not a big surprise. Like you have to be. If you don't know if you think you can handle a coach like that, you should just not be there in the first place. Like it's inevitable. It's gonna happen. Obviously, there's players there that can handle it. Like look at Marcus. I mean, not Marcus. Nick Foligno. Like obviously he can handle a coach like that.
Seth
Look at
Jones.
Seth Jones. Look, there's players that do great there, but it's just they're not enough. And honestly, I think that Columbus will probably lose this trade. Roslovic will probably be there and be committed. It's his hometown team. It's the team he grew up looking for, cheering for. And but I don't see Line staying long.
Man, I don't think you could get two more different coaches than Paul Maurice and John Tortorella. They're both kind of fiery, but Paul Maurice to me seems like that soft-spoken guy who will let like I heard him on Overdrive how he realizes young players are young and they make stupid mistakes and say some stupid things sometimes. But John Tortorella to me doesn't seem like the kind of coach who will let you get away with that sort of nonsense, right? So Patrick Laine might have it in tough there in Columbus, going from one of the nicest coaches to possibly one of the meanest.
Oh yeah, no, he's such a laid back guy and everything. He is going to get ripped apart by Torts and like he's going to be put in his place, hopefully. But no, I don't see him staying there. It wasn't one on his list of desired locations to go. He just wanted out and just took it. But I see him still trying to sign in California when it comes to being a free agent eventually.
It's the long blonde hair, right? That makes you think California, the long
No,
floating
that
blonde
was
hair.
his list. Like I saw it. He wanted it was L.A. and Anaheim. Those were the two places he wanted to go, but obviously they probably didn't need him or didn't have the what.
They're not ready for a guy like Patrick Laine. They're
No,
they're not ready to compete and pay what would be needed to pay to get a guy like Patrick Laine. That's
exactly.
so weird that he would have those teams on his list because you go
It's
from a team that's a cup contender in Winnipeg and you're going to go to the bottom, the dregs of the league in LA and Anaheim. That's just weird.
well, L.A. Anaheim's just outside L.A. It's in Orange County, right? So it's like he just wanted to be in L.A. That was it. It was all. If those are your only two teams, he's obviously just wanting to go to L.A. Like it's not about the team. He doesn't care which team. He just wants to be in L.A.
Well, not specifically. He didn't want to go to San Jose, right? So he didn't. Burbank was too far, right? Burbank was too far away
What?
from.
San
Uh,
Jose?
well, well,
San Jose
San.
is up in the
Uh,
Bay Area.
Bur, well, Burbank is close to San Jose, is it not?
No,
Am I
Burbank's
getting
not
my?
where the San Jose plays. San Jose plays in San Jose.
And I show why I'm not a geography major. Okay,
San
and
Jose is just south. San Jose is south of San Francisco. It's like you have to fly there to get there quick. Like it's like a 4 hour drive at least. I think.
I have no idea when it comes to geography. I just
Well, I'll
try
be
to
helpful
pretend.
with you with that kind of stuff then.
Um, the one thing I can see as I try to get this back on track,
Yeah.
one reason I can see why Patrick Laine would actually stay in Columbus, is Jarmo Kekalainen. Yarmo is Finnish. Yeah. And I'm not just saying because they're from the same country, but he may have, Yarmo would have paid a lot of attention to Line as a young guy, as a young athlete coming up through the system. He would get to know this guy on a different level than maybe some other executives in the NHL and possibly would bend over a little bit more for this guy as opposed to other general managers and executives in the league. And by that, I mean, we could possibly see if Line doesn't like Torts, I think they move on from Torts before they move on from Line.
Honestly, you don't trade for a player like Line A unless you're going to try and commit to him. And I could see that now that you say that. I was going to say before, I'm like, I'm just because he's finished doesn't mean anything. But now you say that though, like as a general manager in general, you don't trade for a player like Line A and give up a player like Pierre Luc Dubois if you're not going to try and commit to that piece. Like I said, if Line A leaves, they get fleeced in that deal. Unless Pierre-Luc Dubois all of a sudden early in his career just declines out of nowhere in Winnipeg, they're going to get fleeced on that deal.
Yeah, Dubois is well protected in Winnipeg too, right? He's going to
Oh
be the
yeah.
second
Oh yeah.
line center as opposed to the first line center in Columbus. He's got a lot of good, strong, intelligent veterans on his team, guys like Shifley and Wheeler to bring him up and grow him into the center that he needs to be. But he also has his father in the coaching system in Winnipeg. His father works for Manitoba as an assistant coach, so maybe there was a little bit of that involved too, where it's going to be a little bit more comfortable for Dubois in the Winnipeg system, having family so close to him.
Yeah, no, it that might be one of the reasons why Dubois was willing to go there, right? Think about that too, right? Now, Where is his? Where's his dad coaching? Is he coaching the AHL now?
Yeah, he's coaching the Manitoba Moose, I believe it. I believe it is. I don't think he's the head coach. I think he might be an assistant coach. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I heard he was an assistant coach, but I wasn't sure if it was with the Jets or the Moose.
No, he's not with the Jets. He's definitely with the Moose. Yeah, so it was an interesting, it was a huge trade. It was shocking trade. And it's one that we're going to track for years to come because both these guys can walk away at the same time. They're from the same draft year. So if for some reason neither team can work out an extension with either of these guys, then we could see both Dubois and Line as a free agent in the same class.
That would be pretty fun to watch on free agents today.
Okay, so it's been a little bit of a tough week in the world of sports. We've lost sports and media, I should say. We've lost some greats, but it's more of a celebration of life for these guys because it's not so much a tragedy because they were able to live long lives and contribute to the fullest. We lost Hank Aaron at the age of 86, and then quite quickly afterwards, we lost Larry King, a media giant, also at the age of 86. And then in Toronto, in Leafs Nation, the Chief, we get the news of the Chief, George Armstrong, passing at the age of 90. And from the tributes I've been hearing on the radio, on TSN, and on Sportsnet, this guy was a key integral piece who was around the team a lot in his later years and shared his knowledge of the game and he was just a good guy to be around. So I share the grief in losing such a great, but it's more of a chance for us to celebrate his life, right, Mike?
Oh yeah. Well, George Armstrong, the whole Armstrong family was well, very, very, very nice people. George and his wife were friends of my grandparents, and they lived close to each other in Leaside. And my dad went to school with his kids growing up, and so my dad, growing up since I was very young, I always knew who George Armstrong was. Um, uh, just a guy from just south of, grew up just south of Sudbury. 21 seasons in the league, like you said, all with the Toronto Maple Leafs. He was a captain for 13 of those seasons, and he had four Stanley Cups with them in the 60s. He was with the team right up till the end, and then right after, when it stayed in the organization, coaching the Toronto Marlies for two Memorial Cups, and then he went on to become a scout, and then left for Quebec City with the Nordiques, and then eventually came back to Toronto. Also, ending up being the assistant GM and head coach at one point, and he stayed in working for Toronto right up till 2015 as a scout, and so he was like Johnny Bower, same era too. Two guys that basically released for life. They were massive parts of this team's history. He wasn't the greatest player on the team ever, but he was always hands down the best leader on the team, probably the greatest leader in Toronto Maple Leafs history. So I personally say rest in peace to an absolute legend, a hockey Hall of Famer, and one of the greatest Leafs of all time.
Yeah, four Stanley Cups and a former captain, guy nicknamed Chief, and you don't get that nickname for not being a leader, right? So we send our condolences to the Armstrong family, and we grieve with the Maple Leaf family for the loss of a legend, of a great, but we also celebrate his life and his accomplishments, his achievements. And it's interesting, man, to segue into our next topic. You brought up a guy who was integral to a single team and who is probably one of the greatest to ever wear the jersey. And we come up on a year since the passing of Kobe Bryant and Gigi Bryant and 9 others in a horrific helicopter crash in the LA hills. And I can't believe it's been a year since this passing. I can remember exactly where I was the moment I found out. I was working. I do delivery to actually make money, as opposed to these media ventures on the side. And I had to pull over. I had to turn the car off, and I sat there in tears for the loss of a man. And we talk about the loss of Larry King, of Hank Aaron, and of George Armstrong. These guys, they lived a full life, and we celebrate them. This is different. This was a tragedy that struck the world. A man taken too young, families taken way too young. And it's just something that is still, it's shocking to me that it's been a year. I don't know how this affected you, but I have to bring up the year anniversary of the loss of the greatest Laker to ever wear the jersey.
Yes. Well, I remember exactly where I was. I was sitting right here. Um, Looked at my phone, saw a post, and I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna wait a bit before I believe that. And about a half hour later, it just got worse. And basically everything that day that was planned for that day was just shut down. Didn't
Yeah,
really give a crap. It was an absolute tragedy. Like so many lives lost, good people. It was a massive loss to the basketball world, and but like basically every sports fan, if you liked basketball in the slightest bit, it's hard to say you weren't a fan of Kobe. You didn't think he was a great player, and he was one of the best.
man, I
And
loved to hate him, right? As a Raptor fan growing up,
ex-
you,
exactly.
but I
If he
loved
was
him
playing
still.
any other team, you wanted him to win, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, that fine tell me you weren't sitting there with a bunch of people watching his final game, that crazy 60-point final performance. Like the guy was the guy was something else. He's way up there he's way up there when it comes to the greats. And it was just an absolute tragedy. He had so much more to give to the game of basketball and to his family and his community. And the tragic loss of his daughter just made it so much worse. And like she had so much potential in the game. They he was so committed to developing her, and she was so committed to becoming a good player. It's just absolutely awful to see that happen to very good people. And I still sit there and keep my thoughts with his wife and the other daughters and the families of the 9 other victims on that helicopter. That was tragedy. That is, it's still, sometimes it's hard to believe it actually happened. And I can't believe it's already been a year. It's still doesn't really feel any different. It
very
still hurts
raw,
to think about
very
it,
raw.
right?
And we talk about Kobe and what he had to give to the game, but this was an Oscar winner for a
Short
script
film.
and a short film that he developed, directed, and so we had to think that, he was going to go on to write books, he was going to go on to do more films, he was going to go on to do greater things. He was on to the second act of his life. His first act was probably the greatest player to play in his era, and then his second act, it started off with him winning an Oscar. I mean, this man, he brought so much to the world, and the world lost so much when we lost Kobe Bryant. But what we gain, what we gain with the loss of Kobe Bryant, is the ability to take that Mamba mentality even more seriously, right?
Yeah.
We think about how he held himself, how he conducted his life, and how he always strived for greatness. And then when you think about Kobe, you can then reflect that upon yourself and be like, how can I be better? Even if it's just getting up 10 minutes earlier, doing 5 more push-ups, pushing it that much further, getting yourself into that Mamba mentality to be a little bit better every single day. That's the Kobe lifestyle, that's the Kobe way, and that's what he leaves us with. So yeah, we were talking about the losses in the sports world, and it just we had to talk about the year anniversary of Kobe's passing. The NBA world mourns, the world mourns, and our thoughts are always with the Bryant family and the families of everybody lost on that tragic day. Looking forward to something a little bit, we'll move on to some more sports talk, talking about the Toronto Raptors, and and where they're headed this season. The start of the season wasn't great, Mike. It was a 2-8 start, and after the loss of Gasol and Ibaka and others.
Wait. Before we go further, did you think that the impact of losing them was going to be as great as this?
Yes, I figured it was going to be pretty bad.
Yeah.
I didn't know if it was going to be detrimentally bad the way it was, but losing two guys with that kind of size and that kind of physicality in the paint, it's got to affect you, especially when the Raptors were small, even with them on the team, right? So, I couldn't have predicted 2-8, but if you did predict it was going to be a 2-8 style season, you would have been wrong, because now look where we're at today after a 2-8 start. We're looking at 2 games under 500. We're looking at 5-7. And this team, or sorry, as the math escapes me, the Toronto Raptors just 2 games under 500. It's a very young team. It's a very raw team. It's a very scrappy team. Is this the championship Toronto Raptors? Hell no, it's not. We know better. There's no Kawhi Leonard. There's no Serge Ibaka. There's no Marc Gasol. There's a lot missing from this team. But if they can continue to be this scrappy and prove that they can grow as an organization, Fred VanVleet proving he can be a starting point guard because Kyle Lowry's on the last year of his contract, Chris Boucher proving that he can be a starting 5 in the league, getting blocks, getting protection under the rim, getting points, then you can go out into the free agent market and convince other guys that this team is just a couple superstars away from being back in that dance, being back in that contention talk, and possibly winning another Larry O'Brien, another championship. I'm still basking in the glory, as you can see right there, as I try to get it right there over my shoulder, my Toronto Raptors hat.
Look at that.
Right there on the wall. Fantastic. We're still basking in the glory from 2 years ago from winning over Golden State, and we can get back there. They can get back there very quickly. Basketball is a quick moving sport, as we have seen with the addition of James Harden to the Brooklyn Nets. I almost called them the New Jersey Nets. I can't believe that. They haven't been in New Jersey for like 10 years, and I still almost called them the New Jersey Nets. It's just something that never leaves your system. But looking at the Raptors, tough loss last night, man, against the Indiana Pacers. Back to back, they got Kyle Lowry back, but he was a little bit out of sync. And looking forward, I don't know if this team is going to be a top 5 team in the Eastern Conference, but I can guarantee you that they will be able to pass teams like the Cleveland Cavaliers and the New York Knicks, and take a playoff spot. Whether or not what they do with that playoff spot, I don't know. But the Toronto Raptors, definitely not a 2-8 team, definitely a playoff team, and they're showing it.
Yep, but honestly, if like you said, if they're gonna go in with this team into the playoffs, I don't think they're gonna get through a round. But I do, but they need to make at least some moves. Like maybe if, like, depending on the matchup in the first round, but anything beyond that, I wouldn't say possible, because of just, honestly, it's just they still need one more person. They've taken some losses, and the big men they tried to bring in to replace Serge and Mark they're not quite necessarily doing what they need to, but obviously they've been turning around, because Siakam's finally turned around from that not the great start, and obviously Fred's the player we signed, and Kyle was back, right? Kyle was back last night, right? Yep.
Yeah,
So
Kyle was back last night. Talking about Aaron Baines, Anthony Len was actually let go,
I
and
saw that. Yeah.
and he was signed by another team to a league minimum contract. But Aaron Baines is a big Australian man. He really wasn't doing a lot. You're right. He's come alive a little bit more now that Nick Nurse has realized what he is, and he can put him in other situations. He normally will start with Baines, but he will ride Chris Boucher in that spot when the time is right. So if we can figure out the math on how much time to give Baines and how much time to give Boucher, then I think that they have a little bit of a relief from losing Mark and Serge. But there's definitely a talent disparity when you lose those two guys and all you bring in is Aaron Baines. That's just that's just obvious, right?
Well, imagine if they didn't have the emergence of Chris Boucher this season. and didn't like and just had Aaron Baines basically right there. You would have had to keep Len. But like Chris Boucher has been playing awesome this year compared to last year. And like obviously he's still young, but it's awesome to see the Canadian guy
Yeah,
do well. So
Boucher is definitely evolved this year and shooting the 3-point shot more. I was watching the game last night because there was only one hockey game on. It didn't start till 10 o'clock, so I didn't really watch that one. And it was a laugher from all of the highlights I've watched. Boucher he lacks some confidence in his 3-point shot. At times. So I noticed, I believe it was the third quarter, he shot a 3-pointer, it went in, but it bounced out. And then his following next 3-point attempts were all light because he felt that he shot the first one too hard. So, and I mean, he has no problem jacking the shot up whenever he's open, but it's the confidence in how much power to put on it and when to back off of that power. So it'll get better and better as the time goes by. But the fact that you have a big man who is able to shoot the 3-point shot, that is the evolution of this NBA game. That's the evolution of the Toronto Raptors, and it's a good thing to see. Only better things to come in the future. Will they be a contending team this year? Probably not. You're right. You know, you want to scratch into the playoffs, but if you're just scratching into the playoffs, you're facing a Milwaukee, you're facing a Miami, you're facing a Boston, and those three guys are juggernauts right now, and you really don't want, or Philadelphia for that matter, you really don't want to be messing with them. Brooklyn is a nightmare matchup for anybody unless you play defensive basketball, because if you can play defense, Brooklyn can't play defense. So it'll be interesting to see how the NBA shakes out this year, who ends up where, and what the playoffs are going to look like in this very strange year. A year after, I believe in March, it'll be a year after the entire sports world shut down. And we're still dealing with these shortened seasons and the restrictions from COVID-19. So it's going to be interesting to see how everything shakes out in the NBA.
yeah, well, honestly, before we get off of that, I just wanted to mention the Raptors do still have 2 months left before the trade deadline to do something to boost the roster before the playoffs too.
I think if the Raptors trade, it's to trade to get guys onto better teams or to into a different situation. Like I love Kyle Lowry, and I would love to see him retire a Toronto Raptor. I don't know if that guy's ready to retire, and he's on the last year of his contract. If a team like Philadelphia, where he's from, is looking for a playoff seasoned former champion point guard, then I could definitely see Kyle Lowry being moved in the or before the trade deadline to a better playoff contending team, so that you can get assets back for him. It's going to be interesting to say the least, but I can see a future, very possibly see a future very soon, where Kyle Lowry is no longer a Toronto Raptor.
I wouldn't be surprised by that. I'd hate to see it though.
Okay, moving on to our next topic, as that was the worst segue I've ever done in my life. The Toronto Blue Jays are making noise in the league, in the free agent market. This is a little bit of older news, but seeing as this is the first podcast that I have put out since it happened, I need to talk about it. George Springer coming to the Toronto Blue Jays, $150 million over 6 years, $25 million a year. Average annual value, but he's getting a $10 million signing bonus. So it siphons down to, I think, about $20 million in his final year. His 38 year, he'll be 38 in his final year of his contract. So it's an interesting deal. It's more interesting to see the Toronto Blue Jays do this, because the largest contract in Blue Jay history before this was Russell Martin at $80 million. So to jump from 80 million to 150, that is a large jump, and that is a sign from not only management but from ownership that we're going for this.
Yep, no, it's awesome. It's exciting to see. I love to see right here that apparently management was pretty taken out from left field, taken out of left field with him actually signing with us, but it worked. No, it's gonna be awesome to see him come in. He's got a few more years in the league, so he'll help all the young guys like Guerrero and Bichette, and he'll be a great great part to this team. I'm actually excited for the season to start.
Yeah, he'll definitely be a great mentor, and I think unless he gets traded, the biggest guy he could be an influence on to me is Lourdes Gurriel Jr. Lourdes has been great as a left fielder. He was tied for I believe the lead in outfield assists with 6 last year. As a shortstop, he was a complete failure, and you were wondering if this was going to be a mistake signing this guy. But then you send him down to Dunedin, and you get him trained as a left fielder, get him acclimated to the fielding position, and it works, man. Left field is the least defensively responsible position statistically for baseball, but he is making himself known in that position, and good for him. And having a guy like George Springer playing next to you, who can play a decent defensive game, who knows how to hit the ball, who's just going to be a good mentor, can only help Lourdes grow as a player and become maybe what Blue Jays management thought he was going to be when they signed him.
And it doesn't really hurt to have him like scandal or not that with that World Series ring too.
Well, I was going to say, where do you stand on the whole cheating aspect with the Astros with George Springer, and how do you feel now that he's on the Blue Jays?
Well, obviously, I'm not going to sit there and think every single player on that team is going to come and just try and, bring any of that mentality over to their new team. But, I wouldn't put the blame on a lot of the players necessarily. Like, management shouldn't have even let that happen. But, like, whose idea was it in the first place?
Honestly, I don't
The
think
players would have been able to do. We'll ever know.
I don't think we'll ever know exactly where all of the blame lies. If it was something brought up by a player or a manager or an executive, or where this crazy idea came from, if they even thought it was okay, because there were screens everywhere and there were cameras everywhere and everyone was watching everything. But it devolved into this horrible, horrible scandal, and I think it needs to be addressed, Mike. I think in the press conference, it needs to be addressed. I don't know if he fully comes out and admits that he cheated and he needs to be better. But I think there's no way that Toronto Blue Jays management can just sweep this thing under the rug, especially when you try to show yourself as a organization of class and of moral standards, by getting rid of a guy of Roberto Osuna for doing what he did.
Yeah.
And I understand there are miles of difference between assaulting a woman and cheating in a game, but if you're trying to hold yourself to a high moral standard, then you have to continue that high moral standard, and part of that is acknowledging what he did was wrong, but you want to be better for the future. And it's interesting to me. You brought up that the management was surprised that he signed here. I think if you're looking to rehab your character, there's no better organization to come to than the Toronto Blue Jays. And a manager like Charlie Montoyo, I don't know if that factored into his decision at all, but this is a widely loved team by an entire country, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
great way to rehab your personal profile if you can get an entire country behind you.
Yep. No, that's very true too. It's probably actually what it probably came down to.
Okay, so looking at a couple of other Blue Jay options in the trade market and in free agency, the Blue Jays were, believe it or not, the Blue Jays were tracking Trevor Bauer, and he was looking to get a $200 million deal. So, one, could you imagine if the Toronto Blue Jays signed a $150 million contract and a 200 million dollar, don't worry about it, and a $200 million contract in the same offseason? That would have been next level, but it seems like that may now be off the table, as the team that was in on George Springer has now moved their mentality and their thought process to Trevor Bauer. Now that George Springer is signed with the Blue Jays, Trevor Bauer is looking. It looks like it's most likely to be Trevor Bauer signing with the New York Mets on a short-term deal, but a deal that is going to make him the highest-paid pitcher in the league, which is something that he was seeking, eclipsing the $36 million per year that Garrett Cole signed in New York. The difference being Garrett Cole signed a long-term deal, and Trevor Bauer is probably going to be signing a 3-year contract at probably $37 million a season.
I'd already be in Queens if I were him.
I mean, that
Short term, take the money, buddy.
I was just going to say is like even if the Mets are bad, which doesn't look like they're going to be bad because they
No.
have Lindor, because they have Noah Syndergaard, they have Pete Alonso, and you add Trevor Bauer. I mean, could you imagine? I'm so glad that the Mets are in the NL because could you imagine having to have them in the AL East and you have to go Syndergaard, Bauer back to back.
Yeah.
I mean that would be that like the Jays didn't have a problem beating Bauer in the playoffs because he went drone crazy and sliced his hand to bits, and wasn't able to pitch. But he's only evolved since then into a better pitcher. Won the Cy Young last year. So you know, my thoughts go out to the NL East and having to face off against Bauer and Syndergaard back to back. That's not going to be an easy matchup for anybody. But yeah, man, I have to agree, man. 3 years, $37 million a year. Go get that bank, buddy. And then you know if you don't like it, you can always sign another contract in a few years.
Yep. And honestly, if they have a good 3 years with that tandem, holy, think about the money he'll bring in, and after that 3 years going to somewhere else, or if he just decides to stay, he's in New York.
Yeah,
He
you
gets to
live
be
the
in the
life, right?
limelight of New York. Yeah, he gets to live the life. It's fun, but that might be his plan too. You could be going in like, I want a couple of years here, and then make my point, and then go and get my real payday in the future. Because who knows what they're gonna be making in 3 years.
Mind you, it's not like he's playing for the Yankees, right? He's playing for
Yeah,
the Mets. If there's a team in New York that you could play for and be able to just maybe disappear a little, it's the New York Mets because they get about 10 to 20% of the viewers that the New York Yankees get. If we're being completely honest, it doesn't mean that their standard of play is worse. It just means that the New York Yankees are the damn New York Yankees, right? Everybody and
yeah,
everyone everywhere watches and pays attention to the Yankees in the same way that everyone pays attention to the Leafs in hockey, right?
yeah.
They're that team that is synonymous with the sport. Um,
Was it that with that too? It's like with the Yankees, you have to be mentally ready to sign a contract like that with them. With the Mets, it's still the same thing though. You're signing a 3 year deal for that much money. You are expected to be an impact player for all 3 years. There's no digression in that,
yeah,
right? You expect digression in a 7 year contract, but that's why the contract's usually structured so you get paid less as it goes on, right? But no, like it has to be mentally ready. Even still with the Mets being in New York in
uh,
general.
and I mean, thinking about the fan base, man. And I said, you know, to rehab your image with George Springer, but I mean, maybe that weighed into it too, right? Like George Springer could go play for the Mets and get a small population of New York cheering for him, or he could go play for the Blue Jays and have 40 million people cheering for him. There's a large difference there. Speaking of the Blue Jays, there is possible trades on the horizon to bolster the starting rotation and to possibly bolster the infield. And one of the trades that has been bandied about is one with the Chicago Cubs, Chris Bryant and Kyle Hendricks. Kyle Hendricks on an affordable contract, a impact starter, a guy who has proved that he can pitch in a smaller home run friendly ballpark, like the Rogers Center would be, or like Buffalo would be, depending on where the Blue Jays have to play this year. Looking more like Buffalo than will be Toronto, at least to start the year. And Chris Bryant, a former Toronto Blue Jays draft pick. If you didn't know, he's a guy who didn't sign, but
Yeah.
he was a pick of the Toronto Blue Jays, and then
Did he
went back.
re-enter?
Yeah, he re-entered. He went back to college, and he ended up getting drafted higher by the Chicago Cubs,
Yeah.
and signed with the Cubs. But Chris Bryant is a third baseman. And as we know from the offseason, Vladimir Guerrero has been adamant that he wants third base. If the Blue Jays do go out and make this trade happen, one, my worry is what they're going to have to pay for him. And two, is this going to piss off Vlad? Because if they go out after Chris Bryant, there is no way in hell Vlad is getting a start at third.
Ah, yeah, that's touchy. What how much is left on Chris Bryant's contract?
I'd have to look it up. I know he's on he
Sure.
was on a longer term deal. But I mean, as you look
Like
it up,
if there's only a little bit of time left, like
I, as you look it up, I'll give my thoughts on it. Personally, as much as I would love to see Vladimir Guerrero Jr. at third base, he's a defensive liability at third base. He has been a defensive liability, and that honestly had nothing to do with his weight. I know he's lost a lot of weight. He's sitting at probably like 220 pounds now from what we've
yeah,
seen from the Dominican League, and he's got his muscle built. His muscle is built up a lot more, and he's able to swing the bat in ways that he wasn't able to last year. But it was his decision making, his timing, and other aspects about the way he played third base that made me question it. And I don't I understand how the Blue Jays want to appease their star, but I don't see his future at third base, at least not as the starting third baseman. I see him being able to be a mobile and very high level first baseman who can play third base in a pinch,
yeah,
but
be versatile.
he's a guy to me that that's going to be a first baseman, and I think that the Blue Jays are walking on eggshells until maybe he comes to the realization that yeah, I'm a first baseman.
Think of this scenario though. Whoa, he's only on a 1 year deal.
Chris Bryant.
Yeah,
So it would have had.
19.5.
Oh, that's right. He accepted the qualifying offer. That's what it was.
Yeah, so keep him. Oh, but would you want to take a player like that and just keep him short term? I was gonna say keep him, bring him in short term, and then give Vlad like reps at that position, but keep him at first base and get him a little bit more mentored and acclimated before you let it give him the starting position.
Yeah.
Let him get used to his body now, right? When was the last time he was probably in this good a shape?
12. And that's not a joke. I mean, this guy,
Yeah.
he said it himself. He relied on his talent. And so the last time he was probably this weight, he was 12 years old because this guy was always big. He was
Yeah.
always a future major leaguer from just looking at his ability and his size. So yeah, Vlad Guerrero Jr. probably in the best shape of his life ever. I just like I said, it has nothing to do with his shape. It has nothing to do with his weight when it comes to third base. It's all up here. And if you can
Yeah.
prove to me that you've learned it up here, because there were plays last year where he jumped in front of Bo Bichette, and Bo Bichette is much more athletic and was able to make the play, but he jumped in front of him and he screwed the play up. He caused an error, overthrew it, wasn't able to get on the ball, blocked Bo Bichette out from seeing the ball and stopped him from being able to field it properly. You know, you have to realize your positioning has to be 100% at the hot corner, because there's a reason it's called that. It's one of the fastest alleys. There are a lot more right-handed batters than there are left-handed batters in the major leagues, and so you're getting a lot more pulled balls down to third base than you are first base, right? So you have to be defensively aware of your positioning at third base, and I just think that he maybe relied like he was relying on his skill at the plate and not putting the work in. He was saying, "Hey, I'm Vlad Guerrero, or Vlad Guerrero Jr. My dad was Vlad Guerrero. He's a Hall of Famer. I've got this in my blood. I can do this without needing to try," right? Well, unfortunately, that's not how it works. Yes, you can be highly skilled. Yes, you can be naturally talented, but you still have to put in the goddamn work.
Sounds like not so bad Josh Hosang.
Poor Josh Hosang, man. Poor Josh Hosang.
He's in
I just
he's in Sweden now, and hopefully he's doing good over there.
Yeah, it didn't work out for Jesse Pujärvi, who went over to Europe to play for a year. He hasn't really done
Has
anything
he
this year with the
scored
Oilers.
yet?
I don't think he scored yet for the Oilers. As we leak back into hockey, talking about baseball, you know, you can tell that that hockey is on the front mind of this podcast. There's not a lot more to talk about when it comes to the Blue Jays. I mean, we could get into the lineup construction. We could get into where and how George Springer is going to help the team, where he's going to hit in the lineup. But all that's going to filter out. We're going to get to see spring training, at least the AL is going to get to see spring training on time, as the Cactus League, the Arizona Cactus League, has sent a letter to to MLB saying that they would like to postpone spring training for an entire month. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly what happens on that front, and if Major League Baseball does postpone.
Yep, that would be terrible to see. I want to keep sports going as long as possible. It's good morale right now.
Well, it brings a sense of normality, right? Like, not everybody watches sports, but if sports is going on, it feels like the world is moving. It feels like we're not so much at a standstill, right?
Yep.
And for guys like us, it gives us something to talk about. It gives us something to look forward to, as opposed to just the mundane of working and making the money to pay the rent. We have something to get excited over, right? So yeah, when
Yep.
sports is going, the world is going, and everything feels normal. Speaking about the world going and feeling normal, UFC 257 happened this past Saturday, and they had fans in the building, and man, did it sound amazing. Hearing fight fans in Abu Dhabi cheering for what was an excellent night of fights that ended with an intense shock to the system. I don't know if it should have been, because but I'm a massive McGregor fan, and so I was stunned at the ability of Dustin Poirier to knock Conor McGregor out, and he was out. That was the first time Conor McGregor has ever been knocked out in a UFC octagon, and boy was he asleep. He gave credit to Dustin Poirier and his game plan coming into the fight, but I just, I mean, I'm surprised Conor couldn't knock him out in the first round. There were a lot of clean shots landed by McGregor in the first round, but that lead leg, man, that lead leg for McGregor got chewed to pieces. They were talking about it on the broadcast, how he had more of a boxing stance, and Dustin Poirier just kept whapping at that calf and destroyed it to the point where it was dead. Conor McGregor, after the fight, had to use a crutch, a walking crutch, to get around, because he couldn't put any weight on it. It was completely numb. It was gone. And when you lose your legs in any sport, unless we're talking sledge hockey and darts, if you lose your legs in
Don't forget knitting.
I didn't know knitting was a sport, but in the pandemic, I could totally see competitive knitting. But if you lose your legs in any sport, you've lost your power, right? You've lost your mobility, you've lost your ability to counter, to really do much, and that was very apparent. Conor McGregor knows it. Gives all praise to Dustin Poirier. But the biggest story of the night for me, aside from Michael Chandler, and we'll get into him, the biggest story of the night for me was Khabib's comments about or to Dana White, telling Dana, you got to open up your eyes, man. I'm leagues above these guys. I've beat them all. And it does not sound like the Eagle is coming back to the UFC, and we're finally going to hopefully get the lightweight title released by Khabib, and it'll be a vacant title.
Yeah, well, he doesn't have anything else to prove, honestly.
Yeah, he's the best fighter I'm eating a large piece of humble pie saying this, because I have been nothing but a Khabib detractor. I don't like him. Maybe it's because he's so good. He's so clean. He's just he's the guy he's the great family guy, and he's a great coach, and he's a great person, and he's a great fighter, and it's just like, man, why do you have to be that good at everything? I don't like you just because. And then when you see what he did after the McGregor fight, you're just like, ha! I knew it. I knew you weren't perfect, right? But I mean, looking back at it, if this is it, if this was everything, he calls it quits at 29-0. Greatest fighter in that division has ever seen. No one can touch him, and I have to eat my giant piece of humble pie by saying that. But I can't be happier to see him go, because if you're that great, then
go on your own terms.
Well, not just that. If you're that great, man, it's not fun watching the division, watching you
ruin it.
Hold the division up, right? Now, without Khabib there, the division is wide open. Yes, Dustin Poirier just knocked out Conor McGregor, but we're going to see a third fight in that. We're going to see a trilogy fight there, and those guys are a lot closer than it appeared with the second round knockout. So yeah, I'm all for lightweight division showdown, which includes Michael Chandler. Quite the impressive knockout of Dan Hooker, eh?
Yeah, I don't think I saw the same one as you.
Uh,
But
the co-main event, Michael Chandler versus Dan Hooker. It was Hooker was running his mouth the whole
yes, yeah.
the
Oh
whole
yeah, no.
lead up. Yeah. And Chandler, not giving Chandler the respect he deserved. Chandler was the lightweight, the 155 champion in Bellator. And he wasn't coming as some guy off the streets that Dana White found in some low level promotion and decided to give a top 6 fight to. No, he wasn't getting that respect, and he put that respect on Dan Hooker's face.
Yeah, he definitely did. He was pretty humble about it too at the end of the fight too, but he gave it to him. You saw it when he's going down too, gets that final hit on the top of the head, and he just drops face down to the floor. It was a pretty clean finish too. It was awesome actually. I never even knew about him until he told me to look him up.
You know, a lot of people didn't know about him. I didn't know about him. That was the first Michael Chandler fight I've ever seen in my life live. And I was excited to see him fight. This isn't a UFC podcast. I got a UFC podcast that I talk more in depth about this stuff about, but I had to talk about it. Great wrestling promo at the end, bringing up the 4 horsemen stuff, and then calling everybody out, calling Poirier out, calling McGregor out, calling Khabib out, calling the entire division out, telling them that he's here for the title, and that shooting star press off the top of the octagon where he almost looked like he tore something. I don't think I'd do that again after every fight, but yeah, Michael Chandler, 155, that division needs to look out, because I think that he's going to be in the title conversation very, very soon. Speaking of title conversations, the man, the title holder, the guy that everybody wants to be, but everybody loves to hate, Tom Brady is back in the Super Bowl. Can you believe it? 43-year-old Tom Brady back in the Super Bowl.
Not surprised, but how do you feel about that? Especially as a Pats fan.
As I look at my Pats jersey hanging there on my jersey rack, my Tom Brady from the very first Super Bowl, by the way, I got the very first Super Bowl patch on it. Man, I was salty when he left. I was even more salty when they got Gronkowski to go with them, and I was doing nothing but cheering against them all year. But and I guess I got a little bit of taste of the other side of the line, right? For years, everyone was booing me and cheering against my guys, and so I got to taste a little bit of what that's like, having them go up against having to go up against Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski. But when you look at what that team is, when you look at what Tom Brady's been able to do, he's the greatest, and I'm still a Tom Brady fan. I still love to see it. And it's just, he just continues to defy the odds. He continues to defy Father Time. He's going to play until he's 65 years old. He's going to be the oldest guy out there, and he never really gets hit, because Tom Brady knows when the pressure is coming, when the line collapses, he just goes down on his knees. He goes down, he huddles, and he keeps himself protected, and lets all the other big bodies around him take the hits, right? He knows how to play that position probably better than anybody who has ever stepped on that gridiron before. And it's quite the storyline. I don't think that the NFL would have asked for any better matchup for a Super Bowl than the one they got. If you were to say at the beginning of the year, what do you want for the Super Bowl? Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, the GOAT versus the Phenom. And it's just, it's so delicious. The storylines that are being written, the thoughts that are being had about exactly how this is going to go down. And on top of all of it, Mike, the Super Bowl is designed to be at a neutral site. That is how it's always been, a neutral location. And somehow, some way, Tom Brady is playing a Super Bowl at home.
Oh my God. I'm excited for this one, man. I'm sure you would have probably never saw this coming in my change of views, but I agree. He's the GOAT. He is hands down, you can't take it from him. I don't think it'll ever be taken from him. And in the 10 years that I've known you, you probably are sitting there like, wow, that's a 360 compared to what it's been over the years. But him leaving the Pats, go into this team that was not that good prior to him coming there and the additions they made when he came, and just turn it around. They're in the Super Bowl. Like that's an absolute great turnaround that Tampa's had over compared to a few years ago, and just to see that wherever he can go, he's gonna be there. He's amazing. He's gonna be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Obviously, he will always be probably be the best ever. Mahomes playing Mahomes in the championship is gonna be fairly fun to see. He's something else. I can't get enough of his arm. And I was a Buffalo fan, so like that was tough to watch the other day. But I thought we had a great start, but then they just took over. I saw as the game went on, it felt like there was the room that there was that Mahomes had the toe problem, right?
Mhm.
It seemed like as the game went on, he just became more and more able to run. At the beginning of the game, he was very conservative, and as the one game went on, he was going and moving a lot more in the pocket. So once that started happening, it was just became nothing. It just became like the Buffalo wasn't able to stop him.
You know what it felt like to me, and I want to get back on the Bucks here in a second, but you talked about the Chiefs Bills game. It felt like to me, the Bills score that touchdown, and then they missed the kick when they missed the extra point. Crack in the dam happened, right? And then as we know, when a dam cracks, it starts to leak, and then it leaked and leaked and leaked, and then all of a sudden the third quarter came in, boof, the dam busted, and Buffalo was flooded with points from Kansas City. It was not fun to watch if you were a Buffalo Bills fan, but I have to stress the point that if you were to take Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and Lamar Jackson, and you were to put them in a room on their own, those guys are all similarly talented. Not one is greater than the other. Lamar Jackson has Hollywood Brown. Josh Allen has Stephon Diggs. Cole Beasley to a lesser extent, but we're talking about star people. He has Stephon Diggs. You look at Patrick Mahomes, he's got Tyreek Hill, Edwards-Helaire, Le'Veon Bell, Travis Kelce, Merkel Hardman. So as great as Patrick Mahomes is, Chad Henne won the game in last week or the week before because of the weapons that Kansas City has. So yes, you need a great quarterback, and checkbox number one for the Buffalo Bills. And you need other star players. Stephon Diggs, he's the start of that checkbox number two. Build on it. Don't crumble. Buffalo, you're there. You got a great quarterback. You got a great team. You got a great defense. Build on it. Get some more weapons for your quarterback, and you'll be back. You'll be back again. You'll be able to possibly go to a Super Bowl and win one finally, as opposed to losing four straight in the 90s there. But getting back to the Bucks, the last time the Bucks were in the Super Bowl, it was against the
Yeah,
Oakland Raiders,
they won it.
and
Yeah.
and they won it. But you know what? You know what I remember about that? I remember a little article that was written afterwards where the quarterback from the Bucks admitted to paying the ball boy to deflate the balls to his specific preference. This was almost a decade before Tom Brady was publicly sodomized for not even being proven to deflating the balls in a cold weather game that was not the Super Bowl. But I digress. I mean, I'm still a little salty over this whole deflated ball nonsense, but I had to bring that point up. The last time the Bucks were in the Super Bowl, their quarterback deflated the balls, and he admitted it. So no more deflated ball talk, but good on the Bucks. You did bring up an interesting point, how the Bucks were not a great team, not a bad team, but not a great team until they got Tom Brady, and they got Gronkowski, and they got Leonard Fournette, and then they went out and got Antonio Brown, and you add that to Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, and then all of a sudden you start thinking, as I listed off the guys for Kansas City just then, right? The weapons are what matters. The weapons are what make you a great quarterback and a great team. And as much, and you know, Tom Brady did it without weapons for a lot of time in New England. He did it on his own a lot. But the reason he's able to be so successful in Tampa Bay is because he's got those weapons. He just has to manage the game in the same way Alex Smith manages the game in Washington. Tom Brady is a game manager now. Yeah, he's got a cannon and he can throw it, but he also knows when to check it down, when to throw it in the dirt. Like I said, he knows when to go down when he's getting sacked. He doesn't need to be the GOAT. He is the GOAT, but he doesn't need to go to GOAT mode to win in Tampa Bay. And so, you know, I guess I'm going to say it. Number 7, Tom Brady is going to get his 7th ring, and he's going to further cement his greatness and his domination of the National Football League. He is the greatest ever. He will be the greatest ever. No one can hold a candle to this man. Even more so because this is not a number 1 pick we're talking about. This is not a number 2 pick we're talking about. This is not a 2nd or 3rd round pick we're talking about. This is the 199th selection of the NFL entry draft, who is going to be a unanimous first ballot Hall of Famer, number 1 greatest player to ever walk on that field.
Yep. No, I agree with you on that, but I don't necessarily agree. I think Kansas City is going to come through. It's going to be a game about defense. You're going to have 2 high-flying offenses going at each other. Unless one falters, the game's going to be around defense. And personally, I think Kansas City's better on that side.
It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a shoot. I don't think it's going to be more. I mean, there will be defense coming from a game where Tampa Bay, they were able to hold down Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, and they were able to dominate the Saints on the defensive side of the ball. There will be defense, but I think there's going to be so many points scored in this game that is going to be probably one of the most exciting Super Bowls we've seen in quite a long time.
Yeah, and you never know what's going to happen in the 4th quarter when you have Tom Brady behind center. So, but again, who knows? Honestly, that's the exciting part about it, though, is that there's just anything can happen in this game. It's going to be awesome. But I'm going to take Kansas City. Plus, I want to give you and Misa a little bit of something to bicker about before that.
Little bit of a wager. We'll get into it again as the episodes go on. We'll have 4 episodes hopefully total before the Super Bowl happens. This is episode number 1. I want to thank everybody for listening and joining us for this on this journey for this conversation through sports. Once again, to go back to the people we lost this week, condolences and thoughts go out to the to Hank Aaron's family and to Larry King, and obviously George Armstrong. The Kobe Bryant, or the Bryant family as well. It is a week of mourning and a week of remembrance and a week of celebration of the lives of some great men. So, I want to thank you again, Mike, for joining me. This is going to be a twice weekly show. We're going to be in your ear so often that you're going to feel like part of the family. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining me, Mike. And we'll be back we'll be back in a few days.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Peace.